Welcome, everybody, to the Between Two Wheels podcast, rest day number 2. Had, the 2 weekends now, the Tour de France. We're now entering the second rest day. Overall, GC is taking shape, and here's what we have on tap today. Reactions and results from stage 14 and 15. That was over the weekend. I took time off from the podcast. Covid19 round 2 testing. Who's going home? Are there any false positives? We have some results from the first round of testing. Ienos Grandeliers, are they rethinking their tour selection team? Bob Youngles, he makes Jonathan Butters upset, but others are coming to his defense. We'll play a little clip of that. Some things to make it go home the ride of the week. And Roglic, he says, I'm clean, I'm drug-free, trust me. Do we trust him? Welcome, everybody. Like I said, rest day. And for us, is it a rest day? No, I'm coming in here. I know there's a lot of other podcasts that are taking the day off. So I thought I would at least make the effort to do a little bit of a recap. Busy weekend for me. I don't know, here in Northern California and all over California, and actually up in Washington. My son's up in Oregon, Washington, going to college, and he sent me air quality. It was 450 something where he was at. I mean, that was horrific. We're in the 200s sometimes, the high 150s, 180s, which is not good to get out and ride. So I didn't. What I did instead was I'm redoing my whole entire garage, made a workbench. Maybe we'll throw some pictures up of that at some point. Anyway, welcome. Glad everyone's here, and hope you're enjoying the Tour de France. Let's get to stages 14 and 15 on the recap. Stage 14 was Saturday. It was Clermont-Ferrand to Lyon, 197 kilometers. We're just coming off Friday, which had a good climbing day and some wacky results going on there. So we thought we would, the tour's like, hey, let's just take a slight break in the GC and then hit you hard on Sunday and give a rest day before we just really take the slog into the Alps. So they're in the Jura Mountains here. The mountains on that day, though, was a 4, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 4. Remember, previously we had Sagan getting relegated, so he missed out on a bunch of his points for the green jersey. He really seems to want that. He really seems to have a problem with the Wout. We talked about that. So he's going up against Bennett. And to get that, Bennett can't get over climbs like Sagan does. So the team went to the front, hammered it on the early Cat 4, distanced Bennett. And in the end, there's a little break off there. I'm not sure where the sprint was on that, but Sagan, he was ahead of Bennett. So he took, I think, 15 points. Bennett took 10. So he gets an additional 5. And now they're setting up the stage for the win for Borah and Sagan, you would expect. Some climbing coming into, some cat, like I said, it's a 2, 3, a 4, and a 4. Sagan gets over the 2, and Borah keeps the hammer down. And the reason I think they're keeping the hammer down is for a few things. One, make Bennett actually make him chase to see if he can either get back on. He didn't get back on, distance all the climbers to make sure, or the sprinters to make sure that Borah could actually get to the finish and give Sagan a chance for the full-on 50-point slog of green points and a stage win, which they've been trying to get here. So there was that on tap. The other thing is make Bennett chase just far enough and just putting the hammer down just enough to make him chase where he's going to be expending energy on a day, a little bit more out there alone, to the point where maybe he doesn't make it to Paris. Maybe he gets time cut. Stage 15, we'll talk about that a little bit. Puts a lot of work in there and makes him, by the time we come through the Alps, he might not be actually make the time cut and make it to Paris. Or maybe you wear him down a little bit where Sagan can actually start making a little bit of headway into this thing. Anyway, so that's what you have. There's some breaks away. Matteo Trentin's up the road. He's still trying to go for these points, and he's kind of clawing those back. But in the last, and we'll talk about the team tactics here, because once again, we talked about the other day with Mark Hirschi and their team tactics coming into play and finally getting the win and kind of them doing it to perfection, where I thought Borah kind of screwed some things up. And I honestly think it's kind of a replay of that here as well. Now, Borah did a really good job with Danny Martinez trying to get the win the other day, was at stage 13 and doing everything they could to get it. And they just got out-muscled. Kamna and Schachmann just got out-muscled by Danny Martinez, which, in the end, it's what it is. And, I want to say that too. Looking back, I rewatched that stage. We talked about it with Chris on Friday, but I rewatched that stage, and I'll tell you what, EF Education First was amazing on that day. Early in the day, they're trying to get in the break, and there's a small break up the front. Then there's this pursuers out there that are kind of in between, with Alaphilippe and some others. And then Danny Martinez comes off the field, the peloton, to bridge up to the pursuing guys before they get to the main break, and everything kind of conglomerates there. And Hugh Carthy and him were full gas. And actually, Hugh Carthy, what a ride of the day, to get Danny Martinez up to the pursuers, and then eventually, doing work on the front for him to get into the break when Nilson Palace kind of faltered. Yeah, well done. They took the team lead jersey, or the team GC. But will they end up holding that? Well, they're going to hold it for at least one day here. Coming in the last 20K, things are still hotting up. Last 8.5 Jumbo and Ineos get on the front. 8.5 to go. Porte gets a flat, and you're mechanical, and you're like, here we go again, Richie Porte. But he did the full-on bike swap. He at least had Kenny Ellis on there, who's maybe the only other rider in the race, maybe Higuita, who's his size, so he can easily do a bike swap. He actually comes back to the group, which is pretty good, because there were some Cap 4 coming into the finish in Lyon, and it was pretty heavy duty. The Côte de la Croix-Rousseau in the next 7.5, we saw Tish Benoot go. Thomas de Ghent try to make a move. We saw Bernal, Hershey. They all took a dig. Van Avermaet, Sagan. And in the end, Søren Kragh Andersen countered with 3.3 and held on for the win. But let's just reverse back there a little bit and talk about what Borah actually did on that day. You had, when Sagan went after Hershey at 3.9 kilometers to go, Hershey's done 3 big moves, narrowly missed the win on stage 2. He ends up, narrowly missing it on stage, I think it was 9, and then he ends up finally getting his win. So you've had him up the road many times, and potential guy, roll the dice, maybe he has 3 wins in this race. Pretty impressive. So he was marked when he took off, and Sagan chased him down 3.9 or so to go, and then didn't have anybody with him. But you roll it back a little bit further than that. Tish Benoot, he really makes a move for Sunweb early on in the 7 or so K to go. A hard move. You had Leonard Kamna bridges up to him and goes through him and decides to keep pursuing it. Now everyone's chasing Kamna. Kamna's, emptying the tank. He's out there alone. And by the time they reel him in, when Sagan has to chase down Hershey and Alaphilippe, he's doing that because he really feels that at this point he doesn't have much of a choice. He's got to. This is the move that's going to go. He's got to be doing this. But then Søren Kragh Andersen does a counter move immediately, counters off of that 3.3, has a little bit of pitch and up and down in there, and enough descent where he easily makes the win. So my contention with Borah is you made Sagan get on the front, and then Sagan ends up, so there's him, and I think it was like 3rd or 4th on the day. So he got a few points, but he missed out on the win, which would have been nice, would at least save Borah a little bit. And he also missed out on the full on points that would go with that. So Kamna, what are you doing in that sense, leaving Sagan totally vulnerable? If you're there and you're not up the road, because you're not going to solo in from that distance. There's too much flat. Still have to go. You look at Andersen as the kind of rider he is compared to Kamna. And Kamna, I think you should have still been holding back for Sagan. Then Kamna probably could have chased down that Sagan or the Alaphilippe move, and Sagan could have gone with Andersen or vice versa. But you would have, you saw Sagan yelling into his microphone for some help over the top when he caught Alaphilippe. So I just think Borah on the day, they're close, but they're doing a few things. And look, they put the hammer down all day. It was excruciating for everybody. I think Bennett's in a world of hurt for all that, but he's hanging on. So in the end, you had Søren Kragh Andersen taking the win. Maybe we'll pull up the actual results for stage 14 and just kind of give a look at what those are. But you had Andersen ended up holding off for the win. It was pretty amazing. The guys afterwards, that whole team, I guess they're the youngest team age-wise in the tour this year. So we got Andersen gets the win. Luka Medjic. I also mentioned to Chris, I was like, there's just 3 Slovenians. There's Jan Palank. There's obviously the 2 Roglic and Pogačar, but there's actually 5. Luka Medjic is another one. Maybe we'll just search by all the nations here. Not Slovakia. There's one Slovakian, which is, as we know, Peter Sagan. Medjic, Pogačar, Roglic, Matej Mohoric, and Jan Palank. So there's your 5 Slovenians, more than the Americans have in the tour for a little country. That's pretty impressive. But what you had here, Andersen, Luka Medjic comes in 2nd, Simon Kitsani for 3rd, and Peter Sagan 4th. But look at Sunweb. Casper Pedersen in 5th. Yeah, the 1st, 5th, and Hershey still in there in 10th. They did a great job on the day of getting the team win, and you saw the whole team congratulating. And then actually, Tom Dumoulin comes across the line. He has a big congratulations to Anderson, his former team there with Sunweb. So it's kind of an interesting day. Everyone had to hammer it out. It probably wasn't as easy a day as some were hoping. But in the end, it's kind of what it was. And then we had stage 15. And I thought we'd do for stage 15, maybe take a listen to Jonathan Scriven and his description of what he expected on the day. Back once again, getting close to those mountains.
Yeah. So if we look at stage 15, this is from Lyon to the Grand Colombier. Now, the Colombier has been in this many times, but here we are now taking a look at a fairly impressive mountain stage that is in the Jura region. And what's very cool about this, as I was looking at it, is so the Grand Colombier is this climb that you can ascend from a lot of different angles. And the Tour decided we're going to do them all. So this stage is actually an ascent up the same climb 3 different ways. And that's a very cool way to do it. So the Grand Colombier will be the end. And the last 70 kilometers or so of this stage is essentially climbing the same peak 3 times. So that's kind of cool. So each one will be slightly different. Of course, you can see there, the pitch is different depending on which side you go up. But that's a sort of an interesting tactic to use. If you look at the map, it's just a jumble there because they're just going around in circles as they climb up that Colombier 3 times. A
great insight, because when you just look at the profile, you don't get that.
Correct. You can't see that on profile, but
it's not like the same name each time either.
No,
so.
Correct. Because each time you go, it's a slightly different peak. So, and that's very typical. Even something like Mont Ventoux, I'm wearing the shirt. There's 3 different ways to climb that, and each way is very, very different. I mean, it's night and day in some ways. So that's the same with the Colombier.
8.1% for the first time up, 8.7% for the second, 11.5 kilometers, and then 6.9. And then the last one is, it's a slog of 8.3 and 9.6 for the last 3.4. So a total of 7.4 and 3.4. I mean, looking at that, that's going to be a beast the last way that they're going up there.
It's a beast.
And it was a beast. And, it was a bit 14 some K for the final climb up there. So that was interesting. And if we had looked at we did look at the map, they're coming in, they're heading a little bit northeast. They come into the Jura right before they start to hit the Alps, as Jonathan Scriven had said. And then they do kind of a clockwise loop around, hitting the first climb. The second one is called the Bitch, right? Col de la Bitch. I'm sure it's pronounced a little differently, but those had some super steep. I think the Monte de la Sella Fromentel, that's the first one they went up. I think they had the most ridiculous steep stuff. You saw Matt Goggle. He was actually weaving back and forth across the road. Big guy. He and Pierre Rollon ended up staying away for a little bit over the first 2 climbs at least. And look, still have Cosnefoy in the King of the Mountains jersey. I don't know why he's the guy. No one's really going for that in a concerted effort. And I think if you did, any guy that can actually climb, you would be someone. And actually, right now, I think you're getting Pogacar in second place on the King of the Mountains, like off by 2 points or so. So it's a little bit there. So what you had there, big GC day. They're on the edge of the Alps. Big climbs coming up. Last 78K, as we just mentioned. They all going around there. And by the way, they had finished up the Grand Colombier on the Tour d'Alin last month with Roglic winning that stage. So with that win, he'd obviously seen that. Now, 2 days before, he said, I'd never seen this climb on stage 13. So he didn't know what was going on that. But, he seems to no significance on the sprint for that day, which is kind of an interesting, way that's playing out, because both Bennett took it and or they were 2 points off, 2 different. So, not much difference there. I think you're always going to see Bent on the intermediate sprints. He's always going to be able to take the points away from Sagan on that. So Sagan's going to have to, once again, dispatch him on some of these ones and try to get more points, either with the sprint point is between mountains, which you do have coming up, or whether it's just at the finish, if you could get rid of him on the mountains. But you're getting less and less of those days, although I think tomorrow might be a day you could do that. So on the last, coming up the last climb, 14 some K, I think before that, Guillaume Martin had a little trouble. Even Bernal was kind of sitting at the back. Martin then ends up with a mechanical. Jesus Arata, who had been in the break, paces him. Takes him a while to pace back up. The whole jumbo team, though, is assembled on the front, and they're able to. I mean, almost everyone except for the big guy that does the hammer throw that's not expected to be on the climb. And you start into the bottom of the climb with Hessink, followed by Dumoulin, and then Wout takes over. George Bennett has a stint there on a really steep section. It's a short portion that he takes over, but it was pretty significant, at least at that point. And then Tom Dumoulin crushes the last half of it, and then Sepp and Roglic are still there. Sepp takes over for a small part, and then Roglic actually, inside the last 1K, does a little move and ends up. I don't know if he's leading out Sepp, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So let's go back down to the climb. While Essink puts the move on, the field is dwindling down. You don't see any attacks up this climb, but for one with Adam Yates. While Van Aert is on the front, pulling away, and at some point, Bernal starts to have trouble. Wout ends up sitting on the front for about 5 miles, just holding on. Like I said, this is a long climb. He's there crushing it for the most part. You're seeing Bernal then have trouble, Nairo have trouble. Neither one of these guys, though, I mean, yes, Wout's climb and his pace is brutal, and it's shedding the field. But when you have someone like Jan Hurt, who's still there, who gets dropped after Bernal, who we then see in the distance, and Nairo, that Nairo and Egan Bernal are just having bad days in general. Nairo, you can see that he had fallen a few days ago inside his shorts. You can actually see a bulge of his bandage on his pelvis. So he has obviously suffered. His whole left arm was bandaged pretty heavily. Egan was being paced by teammates as Route ended up riding with them at some point. Tom Dumoulin then goes to the front and sets another furious pace. We'll talk about perhaps why is he not riding for the overall. One attack, like I said, by Adam Yates, but it was easily reeled in, just kind of a slow motion pullback. No attacks until finally the birthday boy, Sepp Kuss, gets on the front, and inside the last 1K, Roglic takes off. And I'm not sure if he was maybe trying to set up Sepp Kuss, because why were you kind of attack? It wasn't much of an attack, but Sepp immediately sees this, and there's no real gain, and he goes right back to the front and starts setting the pace again for Roglic. And then you had Roglic and Pogačar attacking in that last, K or so there, with Richie Porte being distanced, Lopez, Landa, Kuss, Enric Mas, and they all kind of came in just shortly after. Actually, Porte was a little closer than those guys were, with Pogačar taking the win and the bonus time seconds. A few of them, I think he ends up overall gaining 4 seconds on the day. Iran was next up, and then, Bernal was like 7 minutes back, I think somewhere around the long lines of Nairo as well. A little bit more devastating for those Colombians in this sense, because you didn't expect that. I mean, everyone's like, "Oh, we're coming into the mountains. We're coming into the Alps. We're going to start seeing Bernal in his hometown. Not hometown, but in is really what he likes. He likes the higher mountains. He likes the long sustained climbs. Although these were a little bit, and he just said he didn't have the power. It might have been a hunger flat. I don't know, or maybe he's just not been on. He really hasn't been on since the Dauphiné. And once again, you're getting a lot of criticism. And I listen to a ton of podcasts, so I still see this criticism. And I don't think that people are taking into effect what the COVID year is really about. What I mean by that is the criticism is Roglic. He's coming in way too hot. We've seen him falter in the Giro. This can't last. Okay, well, he did the Giro last year, and he didn't have the team. We've talked about that. He lost 2-3 riders early on that were supposed to be there to help. Sepp Kuss was there. Sepp was not the rider he is now. And he was left all alone. He had a bike transition issue. His managers were all taking a piss at one point when he needed a new bike. It was a whole shit show, and he wrecked, and he had some problems. And yes, he did not look great in that last part of that. He came in really hot and then kind of faded. But like I said, some of that might have been due to some wrecks. Then you had him in the Vuelta. Once again, he did the Giro, then he does the Vuelta. And in the Vuelta, you didn't see that. You saw a different Sepp Kuss. You saw a Nilson Palace. Both of those guys were there to support him. And you never saw Roglic losing time to someone who mattered. Now you fast forward into this season. He had not even raced prior to the lockdown. We come out of the lockdown. Roglic then does the Slovenian that's this first race, the Slovenian Championships. He wins that over Pogačar. He loses on the time trial. He wins the road race. and you're seeing him flying high. Also, the Dauphiné is 2 weeks prior to than it normally is, so it was much closer to the Tour de France. So you need to be a little hotter there maybe than you did. And then he got injured, and maybe that injury actually pulled him back and made him rest up a little bit. My point is, I don't see him. Well, I could be totally wrong, but I don't see it being the same as last year. Plus, just not everybody not having all this. Everyone's fresher except for Bernal. And you looked at Bernal over the lockdown, he was doing some crazy ass rides, 15, 17, 18,000 feet of climbing, 8-9 hour days or something like that. I mean, I'm probably a little over the top, but they were some huge days he was riding. Still, early 20s. I don't know that that's something that the body can sustain at that age. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals and projections here. My point is, I don't see that you don't match last year and this year and then just say, oh, Roglic is going to burn out. First of all, he put in 2 big Grand Tours last year. His body can handle this, and he comes off of those into this year being a little bit more refreshed. So maybe it's not quite the thing. Also interesting, Porte had a really good ride holding up there. He was distanced by them, but it wasn't Wollonga. He kind of rode hard on the front before Pogačar took an attack, and he was distancing, and it was good to see him. I mean, he stuck his nose out in the front and he rode well, and he deserves to be. He was up to 6th place if he hadn't lost time on the windy stage where he was out in the wind. He would be back there. Pogačar had taken some time that he had actually brought back, so he's not suffering as much as Porte due to that stage on the flats. Iran's now in 3rd place, and he. This is the final results you had here. Yates, Landa, all these guys, Sepkus, who looked like he could have possibly won the stage. I don't know why he didn't really go for it. Guillermin, 325 for a guy that was kind of distanced off the back. Quintana loses 350, not so bad after he got distanced early. Barguil, Egan Bernal losing 720 on the day, along with Martinez. So it's interesting here. Go to teams. EF, they got decimated with Higuita crashing out. We'll talk about that in a second here. Movistar back into 1st place. Jumbo Visma 1450 back and 26 minutes down for EF. On the GC, Roglic in 1st, 40 seconds to Tadej Pogačar. Iran 134. Iran just hasn't faltered. He's been pretty steady. We'll see how he does on that last time trial though. Lopez, Yates, Porte, Landa, Mas, Nairo. Top 10 though, all within 5 minutes. Tom Dumoulin, top 10. Sepkus, 17th place at 34-37. Points jersey, Sam Bennett over Sagan, 269 to 224. The youth jersey, that's just on GC. And if you're under 25, that's 232 to 235 to Enric Mas. I don't think you're going to see any changes in there. KOM jersey, God, we need to change this. 36 to 34 to 33. You finally have Pogačar, Roglic moving up into and Pierre Roland kind of as well. And then we mentioned the teams there. So what do we really see from there? Well, one, we said the 2 Slovenians really coming out, being good. You saw the Colombians then are grouping next with a throw-in on the UK gentleman, Adam Yates, who's going to Ineos, by the way. You also see Richie Porte from Australia, who's going to Ineos, by the way. So the 2 top Ineos riders, Porte and Yates, neither one of them on that actual team. We'll see how Ineos comes back and rebounds. Maybe again, he said he had the best power numbers the day before, just couldn't match the top riders 2 days before that, and maybe just had a hunger flat. We'll see. COVID-19. Look, as we're doing this, I haven't seen any reports of COVID-19 positives. So perhaps we're going to come out clean on the 2nd rest day. I'm just looking over the news as we go here. Nothing about it. So hopefully we won't have any problems. I did see where the Ineos staff member who had tested positive, they finally are able to do follow-ups, and it was a false positive. So Ienos, but then they're resetting. So in case you didn't hear that, it was going to be 2 positives in the whole group, your staff and rider. Any 2 positives, your whole team is gone. They tried to change that. The French government said, no, that's the way we're doing it. And now they're still holding up to that, but they're resetting it. So if you had a 1 positive, which I think Cofidis, AG2R, Mitchelton Scott, and Ineos all did. Well, now not Ineos because they retested and it was a false positive. Those 3 teams. now starting the second rest day, they're resetting that whole thing. And I think the teams are probably doing their own internal testing as it is, just to make sure that, if you get someone, popping them out, making sure that they're not going to be a problem. We'll keep you up on date on that. But as of right now, nothing that I've heard about that. How about the Ineos team tour regret? Team Ineos, they made a tour decision not to bring Thomas, not to bring Chris Froome. You saw both of those weren't riding well at the Dauphiné, not so great at the Alon, and they were both kind of fighting for the team, a chance to make the team. Well, leaving both of them off, was that a mistake now that you have Bernal crushed in the overall, losing 7 minutes? Basically, he's out of it on that, I would imagine. They're not going to let a guy like that get up the road anyway. Thomas, he's now finished second at Trento Adriatico behind Simon Yates. Just today in the time trial, he did pretty good in that one. He was able to go from third to second over Rafael Majka, but not enough to overcome Simon Yates, who was doing pretty well. Evidently, he told the team that he did not want to be going to the Tour de France if he was not allowed to ride for the lead. So they said, okay, see ya, don't come to the Tour. So they didn't pick him. Froome, still not riding well. He said he would be able to do something at the Tour, and he kind of was lamenting the fact that he's not there and should have been. But evidently he told the press that he wasn't even given the option or the input about his riding the Tour de France. And much like, unlike Thomas, who seemed to, Thomas second last year, first the year before that. And obviously we've had 3 years ago, Chris Froome winning it. Bernal blows up. So there's real no option B in that case. Carapaz, he was not on track for the Tour de France. And so he's not really that option B anyway. And we've seen him take some really ill-attempted attacks and not really doing, they're not really riding quite as great as a team. Remember, they lost Nicolas Portal, their team director. He was quite the man that held the things together, and maybe they're just not quite the same direction that they have. So what are their team options? Well, Bernal blows up, so they have no option B in place. Like I said, Carapaz wasn't going to be that one. You have the leadership of Froome and Thomas, who might have been able to help this thing a little bit. I don't know what they could have done. The death of Portal. And then the last question I was thinking about yesterday, when you see Tom Dumoulin on the front for so long, still holding the top 10, and even after he peeled off and Sepp Kuss took over, you still see him trying to slot in as best he can and holding his way to the top with as much without losing time. He did a really, really hard pace and set a really good show of turn there for the team. Would you see Thomas or Froome doing the same for another team member if they were put in that same position? I don't think you would. You see them doing little things here and there. Last year, there was some questions about Thomas. Is he chasing down Bernal? Because he was kind of riding for the overall. And I think, Kreuzwick had come on and said, whoa. When Tom, decided that one day he was going to, that was the day that was kind of necessary because it appeared it might have been necessary. I think Sepp Kuss was having a bad time. He wasn't up there anymore. And Dumoulin was took over, kind of like, oh, someone needs to. I don't know that he needed to that day. And Kreuzwick was saying it was totally unnecessary and he could have held back and still been racing for the overall. I think you're going to see Tom Dumoulin in the top 10 and kind of wonder why he was doing this. I still think we'll see how the time trial goes. Maybe we revisit this after that and kind of see where he is. So kudos to him. Big fan of Tom for laying it down for his team and for Roglic in such a dramatic, Roglic must be a decent enough guy, or you're getting paid well enough to do this, or maybe you're just that great of a teammate. Because you're not seeing other big name riders kind of throwing it down except for Wout. I mean, he is doing it. I don't know if everybody saw, and we'll see if we can pull this up here, the Sergio Higuita yesterday. He ends up crashing out, and he was crashed out by Bob Jungels, and it was quite a dramatic thing. And then I saw some responses on it. Maybe we'll see if we can play this without getting ourselves in trouble. We'll just go off of Twitter here and give some credit to Coors. It's probably Sporza. And boom, hard takedown. I know it was really hard. And then, of course, keep riding. So they'll replay it here. Higuita goes down hard, 150, 160K to go. He does end up remounting. The doctors come over because, worried about Romain Bardet and his concussion. But look, he looks for, even tries to break. He looks over, he's drifting. He's even drifting a little bit. And that's a dramatic move by Bob Jungels. I don't know if that's ever necessary. That's quite the Cat 5 move done by Bob Jungels. Team DeQuinta Quick Step. I don't know if I haven't heard from Lefevre if he's expecting lawsuit on that or not. But Higuita, he was able to remount and get back to the group. And then as soon as he did, he crashed again and ended up abandoning. Evidently, he broke his hand. And the second crash, he wasn't even able to brake. So that was part of the problem. So it looks like to me that was pretty obvious that was Bob Jungels' fault. And with that, though, I thought it'd be interesting to play here a little segment from David Miller, if you listen to my review of Jonathan Vaughters' book report, not a fan of each other anymore, but take a listen. This is from ITV podcast, David Miller, who does ITV broadcast with Matt Rendell.
We lost the Higuita today.
Unbelievable.
Oh, that was horrible.
Poor dude.
That was horrible.
That was a classic racing incident, wasn't
And
it?
a classic Jonathan Vaughters tweet afterwards.
Oh, what was it?
Going after Bob Jungels.
No.
Job
Yeah.
Bungles.
God, that was
Job
just
Bungles.
a pure incident.
And he literally tagged him in it.
Oh, that happens all the time.
What
It's
did
like,
he say,
yeah,
though?
that's
No
just-
one crashes.
He said, I can safely say my least popular person right now is Bob Jungels.
Ooh, that is ridiculous.
Something like that. And it's just like, why? It wasn't his fault.
Right,
It's a
so
racing move.
totally different.
We lost the Higuita today.
It wasn't his fault. It was a racing move. Like they were so exasperated with Jonathan Vaughters basically saying, hey, Bob Jungels isn't my fan. You just took out one of your big riders who might still have a chance at a stage win. One of your up and coming riders. I mean, Vaughters talks about him all the time. Won the Tour of Colombia, second in the Tour of California behind Pogacar. So he can obviously, ride uphill well. And, maybe he had an injury. He had an injury. Yeah, I think he wrecked early on. So he's been kind of trying to come back from that. And I think you're starting to see a resurgence of that. He's a big player for your team in the last week of the tour. And and my God, you tagged Jungels in a tweet, and therefore it's the worst thing in the world. I just thought it was the dumbest thing to say. And maybe look, was that a racing move? These are the things that you do for a Cat 5 that you get called out for. It was a harsh move over to the right. Now they're saying, oh, look, he was overlapping wheels, but he really wasn't. I mean, you're going down a hill. There's plenty of room there. And Bob Jungels says he, sorry and whatnot, but he did not have to make that dramatic of a move. If you did that in any race, that's not a racing move. I'm sorry. What Higuita was doing, looking back, that's a racing move. And I can understand if you overlap and those things go down. But he did bring his head back, and then he sees what's happening. He tries to grab a handful of brake, but it doesn't matter because Bob Jungels was taking a do right turn. It looked like Fauci's pitch on the first pitch that went the opposite direction of what he was supposed to. Jungels, I'm really sorry for taking Higuita out of the Tour de France. The DeQuinta Quick Step rider defends himself after EF Pro Cycling rider crash. We were fighting for the break. I was on the front, and at one point I wanted to pass the turn onto Sergio without knowing he was on my right, and other people told me he was looking back at that point. And there you go. Is that a reason? So people often overlap. You don't just expect that they're not going to. Crashes like that are always unfortunate. That's part of the point. That's true. I was swinging off the right after an attack. I didn't see him on my right side. Unfortunately, I must have hit his front wheel. Yeah. Do you think so? And yeah, I'm really sorry to hear he's out of the race because of a crash. I don't know what to say. Yeah. Look, I'm not taking Bob Jungels. I feel really bad for him. I spoke to his teammates. Okay. An ambulance. Yeah. So I'm not going after Jungels on this, but I'm just going after people that want to, maybe I need to do some research, or maybe you guys can do this for me. How did David Miller feel about, or Peter Koenig, that was the other person that was chiming in there. They were just appalled. How did they feel about the DeQuinta Quick Step rider getting just in a race incident, getting into the barriers and almost losing his life at the Tour of Poland? That okay? That's perfectly fine. You're up, and you probably are really steamed at Lefevre for trying to bring criminal charges and lawsuits against Groenewegen, saying he should be expelled for just doing a race move, dude. It's not that big of a deal, right? No, anyways, it might be. Last thing we'll talk about is Roglic. He said Tour de France leader insists that he has nothing to hide. This is what you get every time you win or you're in the lead. Slovenian said he can definitely trust his performance when asked if he is competing clean. This is like the when did you stop beating your wife type of thing, right? Asked about his credibility, given there are always questions of the tour leaders going to the third week. Roglic answered, there is no need for concern. I think there was a lot of doing a lot of controls today, a little after 6 p.m. I had a full control, he said. I just had a control. So I think there is really nothing to hide. And at least looking from my side, you can definitely trust it. Now, the problem here is obviously it's not, it's the kind of the environment and the scenario that Lance Armstrong has put out where, he bashed everybody and ripped everybody. And in the end, he was really dirty, and had gone after everybody for, making accusations. But you can't, because one of the parts is he used to say, I've never had a positive test. Well, Lance had that one, but he passed a bunch of them and he was dirty as can be. So these riders pass these. So it's hard to have the belief and just to say, and to rely on the testing as the method for proving your innocence. But then what else do we have? We've not really much else we can do, but hope. And then actually maybe just think of it a little bit more in a sporting context of, for me at least, entertainment. It's entertainment. I'm enjoying it. I don't think the riders do quite the attacking that they used to do. I've talked about this before, where you're seeing them slug it out with 2 big climbs to go, and then they slug it out on the last climb. I just don't think that's physically possible, and you're not really seeing that anymore. It's more long, steady stuff until the last few K, and then they take 1 or 2 attacks, and that's about all they have in them. What do we have coming up? Well, today's the rest day, stage 16 tomorrow, to Vallal-Luron, 164K. It's a little bit of a mountain day. It's a 4, a 2, a 2, a 1, and a 3. Last 3 is at or near the summit height prior to the Cat 1. So it kind of dips up to the 1, dips down, and then hits the last 3. So maybe, I don't know if it's going to be a GC day, especially with coming up the next day, stage 17, up to Col de Los, 170K. We have a Mike Sayers video of that we'll try to put out. And that's just flat, and then HC and HC, 2 big climbs. So those ones will be pretty harrowing. So when you have that coming up on stage 17, plus the other stuff that happens later on in the week, sometimes stage 16, when it looks like on paper it's going to be a big blowout, it quite possibly is not. And then lastly, how about the ride of the week? I'm giving it to Richie Porte. Richie Porte's been rumored pretty heavily to be going to Ienos next year. And this is probably his best tour that he's ever done, especially when they're saying that the competition is so high and the level is so high. And he's hanging up there with the 21-year-old Pogacar and the 30-year-old Roglic, and just come off his win at the Vuelta. Pretty impressive. Roglic, that is. So it's good to see Porte kind of coming back, makes it through stage 9. No crashes so far. Has a bad wind day. Bummer. I wish he hadn't had that. It would have been a little bit tighter front. Would have been a little more exciting. He's had a little bit of support. Balcomolomor did crash out, so he has been less for support from teammates. Kenny Ellison is there, but he's been able to just hang tough. Like I said, he had a bike mechanical, which you thought, oh man, I remember this when he was dueling with TJ Van Garderen for the lead of BMC, and he comes in the last 5K and has a flat. He's on the front, and no teammates are there to help him out, and he loses a bunch of time. He's not having that this time. So far he's been able to rebound. He's been able to do well, and I'm giving him the ride of the week because even when the S hit the fan in the last K there, he did put his nose in the wind and got distanced on. He distanced Lopez and a few of the other guys. Was almost be able to hang with Roglic and Pogacar in the finish. So for that, we are giving him the ride of the day, or at least the ride of the week, or something. Ride of something. And anyway, everybody, that's what we have for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Episode 197. 197. Cruising up here, getting close to 200. And pretty soon we will have 200 episodes in the book, and we'll probably hit that in the during the tour. All right. Thank you for joining today. Be well. Keep safe. Hope you have some good air quality out there.